Okay, so have you ever tried to have a really detailed conversation with one of those chatbot AIs, and ask it something with multiple steps and it just
Hmm.
gives you a totally bonkers answer?
Yeah, yeah.
That's kind of what we're talking about today, unpacking why that happens, but more importantly, how a really cool technique called chain of thought prompting is changing the game.
Yeah, it's like we're giving these AI systems a toolkit
Yeah,
to think through problems.
exactly. And we're going to deep dive into some cutting edge research that shows how giving these AIs step-by-step instructions just supercharges their ability to reason. And what's wild is it's not just about giving them more information.
Right.
It's about changing how they think, how they process information.
Yeah, it's like instead of throwing a whole bunch of data at the AI and hoping for the best, you kind of have to walk it through the process. Like think about how we learn.
Totally.
It's like if you're trying to bake a cake, right? And you just chuck flour and sugar and eggs in a bowl and you're like, become cake.
Mm-hmm.
It's just chaos.
Yeah.
But with a recipe, right? With step-by-step instructions, even someone who's never baked before can make something amazing.
Okay, so that's basically chain of thought prompting, or COAT in a nutshell. It's about giving these AI systems, these large language models, or LLMs as they're called, a recipe to
Yeah.
follow, right? Like breaking these big complex tasks down into doable steps.
Yeah, and what's really cool is that this whole approach helps LLMs tackle these things called inherently serial problems. And those are basically tasks that have to be done in a certain order where each step kind of builds on the one before it.
Right? Like you can't frost the cake before you bake it.
Exactly.
So that's something that LLMs without COAT really, really struggle with. And it's a big reason why sometimes you get these crazy answers because they're trying to do everything at once instead of following a logical sequence of steps.
It's like they're trying to solve this massive equation all in their head instead of writing it out neatly on a whiteboard step by step.
And here's where the research gets even more interesting. They found that training these LLMs with COAT, even if those chains of thought have some little mistakes in the reasoning, it can still make them better at what they do.
Yeah,
So hold on, how can incorrect steps make the AI smarter?
it's a super good question, and it really gets at how powerful this COTI thing can be. The researchers look into this by using something called circuit complexity, which is essentially a way to analyze the computational building blocks an LLM has.
So it's even a kind of flawed blueprint is better than a pile of random bricks because at least the AI has something to work with.
Yeah, exactly. It's like giving someone a recipe where the measurements are a little bit off. The cake might not be perfect, but it's definitely going to be closer to a cake than if they just started randomly throwing stuff together.
Okay, so this circuit complexity thing helped the researchers see why some tasks just have to be done step by step to be solved. They call those inherently serial problems. And without that step-by-step approach, LLMs are kind of stuck, especially with these really complex reasoning tasks.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's even if you give them a roadmap that's only partially correct with a few wrong turns, it's still way more helpful than letting them wander around in the data equivalent of a maze.
100%.
And this is where the researchers use this really interesting example. They call it the permutation group problem. And don't worry, we're not going to go full-on math class here.
Yeah, math and me, we're not on speaking terms.
Totally. Fair enough. But the important thing is this problem is basically impossible for an LLM to solve without using COCOT. It's like trying to do a 1,000-piece puzzle without looking at the picture on the box. But get this with COT, by breaking it down into these smaller, more manageable steps, suddenly the LLM can solve it.
It's like they finally find those corner pieces of the puzzle, and then boom, they've got a path forward.
So what you're saying is if our listeners out there thinking about using an LLM for something that has a really specific process that can't be done in just any random order,
Right.
COT could be a game changer for them.
Totally. It's like you can ask somebody to bake a batch of cookies, but if you hand them all the ingredients in a very specific order with instructions, it's going to be a lot more successful.
Now, I do have a question here. Do you have to give the LLM a whole set of instructions every single time, or can it learn to use this chain of thought kind of approach more generally?
Oh, that's a really good question. And actually, the research found that it works both ways.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So you can train it to think step by step, but then you can also give it additional COT prompts
Yeah.
whenever. Okay, so it's teaching the AI to bake, but then also giving it specific instructions for I don't know, that really complicated croquembouche dessert if you ever need it to make one.
Yeah. And the
Yeah.
paper actually goes into the really technical side of this too. They even look at how the size of an LLM, specifically what they call the embedding size,
Yeah.
plays into all of this.
You know what? I'm going to be honest. I had to reread that section a couple of times to really wrap my head around it.
Yeah, it's a little technical, but basically the embedding size is like the AI's short-term memory.
Okay.
So like the bigger the
Yeah.
size, the more info it can hold and process at once. But here's the really interesting part. Even with a limited embedding size, using Boost, still gives these LLMs a massive boost when it comes to handling these complex calculations.
So are you saying that even a smaller LLM, when it has COTI, can actually outperform a much larger one that doesn't?
That's exactly it. It's like giving a really resourceful chef a couple of extra tools instead of just building them a massive kitchen. You know, they can already do amazing things, but those tools just make them even better.
And this isn't all just theoretical, right? The researchers actually put COTI to the
Oh,
test.
yeah, they did. They used four, like, classic computer science problems
Yeah.
that each had a different computational structure, and they tested how LLMs with and without COTI would handle them.
So without getting into the weeds here, the big takeaway was that the LLMs using COTI just blew the others out of the water.
They did. It was like night and day, especially on problems that need this like sequential reasoning, where you have to do step one, then step two, and then step three. And they found that COTI was especially helpful for LLMs that have a limited number of layers, which is what they call depth, because it helps them to just better use the computational power that they've got.
So it's like COTI is unlocking this hidden potential in these LLMs, giving them a way to tackle problems that they never could have before. And honestly, it feels like this is a huge step toward making AI that can actually think and reason more like we do.
Totally. It's like we're making them smarter, not just bigger.
So like, how does this all actually matter?
Yeah.
What's the so what here?
Oh, it's huge, honestly.
Yeah.
Like, think about any field where problems are solved in a really, like, structured, logical way. Like scientific research, for example. LLMs with COTI could be analyzing mountains of data, coming up with hypotheses, maybe even designing experiments.
Right.
And they could lay out all their reasoning in a way that we could easily understand and follow.
So it's like having this AI research assistant that doesn't just crunch numbers, but can actually like think about the data critically and be like, hey, what if we looked at it this way?
Exactly. And it goes way beyond science, too. Think about things like financial modeling, legal analysis. Heck, even writing a novel where the plot has to unfold in a certain way.
Yeah, it's like we're not just asking AI for answers anymore. We're actually having a conversation with it where it's not just spitting out data, it's actually reasoning with us.
Yep.
Like I'm already thinking, instead of just saying to an AI, write a poem, I could say, help me write a poem about loss. But I want it to start with this really vivid memory and end on a message of hope. And Cook could actually give the AI the framework to like collaborate with me on something creative and meaningful.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, we're just getting started. If we're seeing these kinds of results with COTI techniques that are still pretty simple,
Right.
imagine what the future holds. As this technology keeps getting better and better, it's getting mind-blowing.
So for everyone listening, here's something I want you to think about. If even these basic COTI methods are already unlocking so much power in LLMs, what kind of problems could we solve with AI that can actually reason and plan and problem solve right alongside us?
It's a really exciting thought. As we create more and more sophisticated COTI techniques, we're essentially teaching AI to think more like we do, which opens up these incredible possibilities for collaboration and actually solving problems together.
That's a great point. And on that note, that wraps up our deep dive into chain of thought prompting. We hope you guys found it as fascinating as we did. And hey, next time you're interacting with an AI, remember what we talked about today. Think about the power of breaking down those complex tasks into clear, logical steps. You might be amazed by what you can achieve together.